Alright, so we're going to continue with the second half of chapter Kufhei 105. This is a chapter that describes in detail some of the Ashgacha, some of the divine providence that the Jews experienced in Egypt and after they left Egypt, all the way till they entered the land of Israel. And you may wonder, why does he go into so much detail? After all, the history of the Exodus is pretty much documented in the Torah. What is he really adding over here by describing all of that? Well, the simple explanation is that we need to appreciate and thank the Almighty for everything He does for us. There is direct involvement from above to what goes on down here. The Jewish people are about to learn some valuable lessons. They were not brought up with it back then. They were not aware of all this. They needed to be educated. They're being formed into a nation. They're about to receive the Torah, which is a tremendous responsibility. And in the future, they will not have that direct contact with the Almighty. They will not have a Moses to turn to and ask what's going on. So obviously it's important for them to learn firsthand from their own personal experiences what to expect in the future. Because we have a tradition that what happened in the past will recur. What they experienced in Egypt will be experienced again in future exiles. There's a lot of information here, and we don't have that much time to go too much into depth. We have approximately an hour to cover it. So that's why I decided just to cover the basics. But there is really a lot that can be learned from every single pasuk, every single verse. Sometimes it appears that David HaMelech repeats himself, but really he does not. He perhaps sometimes emphasizes certain points, and therefore maybe discusses them more at length, but there's no repetition. And Hashgacha, divine providence, is something that every human being needs to learn about. A lot of people had this idea that God maybe created the world, but He's no longer around. And this very much reminds us, yes, He is around. Not only is He around, but we can actually speak to Him, we can pray to Him. So this is not just intended for Jews, it's for anyone who may doubt sometimes God's existence. This comes as a reminder, look, God exists, God made a promise, and He kept His promises. He delivered them from Egypt, and He will deliver them once again from the present exile. So this is a very powerful chapter, one that describes the importance of believing not only in God, but in His divine providence, that He actually oversees what's going on here. He's in charge. It sometimes may not appear to be so because of another concept called Hester Panim, where He conceals, so to say, His face, which means basically He's still around, but the miracles are not as obvious, and people begin to doubt. So here, this chapter reminds us that no matter what we experience in our personal life, let us not forget that at all times we can turn to Him. He actually listens to us, as He did in the past. So we're holding verse 23, Vayavo Yisrael Mitzrayim. So he describes the Jewish people coming down to Egypt, how this was part of a plan. Divine providence means that there is a plan. It's not that something just happens out of the blue and Hashem makes a decision right then and there. Hashem was before He created the world, He's around now, He will always be around for eternity. So He has a divine plan, not only for the world, for His creation, but for the Jewish people. They have a unique mission. So they're coming down to Egypt. How do they come down to Egypt? We discussed last week. It wasn't that just Jacob decided, I'm going to Egypt, I'm moving. He would rather have not moved from where he was. He was compelled because of the hunger. So Hashem brings hunger to compel him to come down. Yosef is sent to Egypt as a slave, eventually to become the viceroy. So everything is orchestrated in a very interesting way in order to achieve a certain goal. So there's meaning behind everything that's going on. It's not just happening by chance. But sometimes we just can't figure out why certain things are happening. It's only at the end, after the fact, that we're able to put all the pieces together and realize, wow, now everything begins to make sense. Why did they, the family of Yaakov, need to go through what they went through? Why did the Jews need to spend so much time in Egypt as slaves? Hard work. What for? Did they do something wrong to deserve so many years of suffering? So things become a little bit clearer with this chapter in Tehilim. So Vayavo Yisrael, if you look at the verse, if you want to follow, it first mentions the name Israel. Vayavo Yisrael, it's time that Israel arrives in Egypt. V'Yaakov gar be'eretz Ham. And Jacob lived or sojourned in the land of Ham. If you recall, Noach has 3 children. Ham is basically the one that inhabits, for the most part, the continent of Africa, even though the descendants of Ham are elsewhere as well. And today the whole world is mixed. But initially, you have Shem, pretty much Asia, Middle East and Asia, and you have Yefet, Europe, for the most part, and then you have Ham. So here it's describing Egypt as the land of Ham. But why first say Israel and they call him Yaakov? Our tradition teaches that Israel is a name that describes the Jewish nation when they are at their height, when they are in peace, when they are princes, from the root Sar, Israel. But at times they are on the level of Yaakov, which comes from the word heel, down, below, struggling perhaps during the time of exile. So there is a division, there is a split here between the initial arrival in Egypt, coming as a family that has no troubles, that doesn't have to come onto anyone. They can provide for themselves. They're definitely not slaves, but eventually they spend time in Egypt as Yaakov on the lower category. So that perhaps could be one explanation as to why he begins with the word, with the name Israel, and then switches to Yaakov be'eretz Ham. So far, what have we seen? Rabbis tell us in the Gemara, and it's mentioned in the Zohar, Ragloi de bar inish in an arvin. This is I'm saying it in Aramaic, and then I'll translate it. Ragloi de bar inish in an arvin latar de mitba'in taman movilin yate. One's feet are his guarantors. To wherever they need to come, they will take him. In other words, we think we make the decision of where we're going to go and where we're going to live. It's all dictated from above. Our feet will take us to where we need to be. A person needs to be in a certain place. He may not even have thought of going there. He may not even know of that place. Somehow he will get there. So we see that idea in this verse. You think Israel or Yaakov intended to go to Egypt. He never dreamt of it. So here he's going against his will, you could say. So a man's feet are the ones that are going to drive him or take him to where he needs to be, for whatever reason. All of that is part of the Ashgacha of the divine plan. Now, this could be for himself personally, it could be for his family. In this case, this was for Yaakov's family, but so was it for Egypt. In other words, the picture, the divine picture, is a picture that encompasses many, many details. It's not necessarily just one detail here, the focus on the family of Yaakov, the Jewish nation. No, there's some benefit of the Jewish people being in Egypt. Egypt is going to get something out of it as well. So all of that is b'ashgacha, through divine providence. Next pasuk. Vayefer et amo me'od, vayatzimeo mitzarav. So you may recall from reading the Torah that what happened to the Jews in Egypt, that despite the fact that they were subjugated, they were working very hard, and naturally they would not have procreated and become a very, very large nation, but they did. Pasuk Chavdalet points out that he multiplied his nation greatly. Not only did he multiply them, Vayatzimehu mitzarav, and made them mightier, stronger than their adversaries. So this is against the natural laws. Naturally, that should not have happened. So this is miraculous too. The fact, not only did they survive, but they multiplied. And the Midrash goes into more detail. What does it mean they multiplied? They had 6 tuplets, according to one Midrash. Something that was not the typical for women to carry 6 tuplets. And here we're talking about many. So the nation multiplied into the millions in a short time. And they became stronger. They should have become weaker. But somehow, through the Hashgacha, this is Hashgacha too, they did not become sick, they did not become weak, they became stronger. A very important idea that sometimes people think that because of one's perhaps health, his weak health, he may not live long. There are some people who are very healthy and don't live as long as those who are unhealthy. A person can sometimes be unhealthy. He may have some illness, but Hashem decided he's going to stick around into his 80s. Whereas another person who may be very healthy, exercising, very fit, dies at the age of 50 from a heart attack. What do we know? It's all from above. The word Vayefer, however, troubled me a little bit. Why did he use this word to describe they multiplied? He could have used other words to describe that they multiply, even though we know that the root of this word in Hebrew means to be productive. But I was thinking of another word. There's a word called Hefir Atzad Goim, that Hashem frustrates the plans of the nations. They have all kinds of plans against us, just like the Egyptians had. What was their plan? To kill the Jews, to make sure that they don't multiply. They did all kinds of things to limit their increase in population. Vayefer, perhaps, this is my own opinion, is indicating here that Hashem frustrated or canceled or spoiled the plans of the Egyptian in order that the Jews will nonetheless multiply and become a great nation. The lesson here, however, is that even though sometimes people go through all kinds of difficult situations and challenges, they don't realize that the pain and the suffering and the challenges, not only are they tests, but they are designed to make a person stronger. If a person has to go through a difficulty, he should know, number one, that God has given him the tools to contend with it and to deal with it properly. He would never give him something that he cannot handle. That's number one. Number two, he will grow from it. He will learn something from it. A lot of people sometimes ask me, when we talk about astrology, what's the best mazal? There's no such a thing as the best mazal, because even if someone has a challenging mazal, that could be good for him in many, many ways that he would never even think of. As a result of him having certain difficulties, as a result of all the challenges that await him because of that, in quotes, difficult mazal, he will become a great man. I've told you that there are kids that grew up in broken families, abusive families, parents who were not good, and they came out strengthened from it. They became beautiful parents to their kids, even though it would be expected, and that is normal to think that way, that a child growing up in a difficult environment, in a broken home, would also have a broken home himself. But you'd be surprised, some of them became strong as a result and built up beautiful homes against all odds. No one would ever think so. So challenges are good. It's not that Hashem hates you. This is a punishment like some would want to claim. Don't look at it so negatively. Everything is good. God is kind. Just that we don't understand it. We misinterpret it. So here the Jewish people are going through Egypt. They're suffering. They're being killed. It's all for some ultimate good. Next pasuk. This is something that has happened a lot throughout our diaspora. Verse 25. He turned their hearts to hate his nation, to conspire against his servants. Hashem turned their heart? Yes. Initially, it could be the Egyptians were okay. They didn't mind that the Hebrews were there. They got along. Something happened at some point. Hafach libam. He turned their hearts to hate his nation. What does this tell you? That sometimes anti-Semitism is directed from above. It's not that these people are full of hatred themselves. They could be very nice gentlemen. It could be that they have a good education and they have no discrimination whatsoever. It could be. But what happened? We have a clear tradition that when the Jews become too comfortable in exile, Hashem reminds them, you don't belong here. Remember, you belong in Israel. You can't assimilate. And that we had, unfortunately, a very, very harsh reminder in Germany in the early 1930s with the Nuremberg laws. The Nazis had to remind us, we can't marry pure Aryans. You're not an Aryan, so you can't marry us. We should know that on our own. But they had to remind us, no, keep a distance. We are pure Aryans and we don't want to mix with you. In Iran, something similar happened. Khomeini had to tell the Jews, you better close your shops on Saturday. Isn't Saturday your holy day? What are you doing opening your business on Shabbat, on Saturday? He forced us, that's what I heard. He forced the Jews to close their shops on Shabbat. No business on Shabbat. Had the revolution not happened, there would have been a lot more assimilation there. That's what I'm told. During the Shah, things were very, very comfortable in many, many ways. And when things become too comfortable, then some people take the liberty to do all kinds of things that are forbidden. So that is also by design from above. We may not like every aspect of it. Okay, fine. Some things perhaps are extreme, but perhaps there's some benefits from it. And everyone who lived in Iran will tell you, yes, there was some benefit to that revolution in some ways. Obviously, they had a very difficult time initially, but it was all from above. And we have not seen the end of it yet. There is a divine plan of why the revolution needed to occur, which I spoke about in other lectures, and hopefully soon I'll give another talk about it. So, Afach libam lisno amo, yes, sometimes Hashem turns their heart. He basically makes them hate the Jew in order for the Jew to keep his distance. This also reminds us that don't be so certain that this individual who you think is your friend will be your friend forever. One day he can turn against you. We'll talk about the enemies. Even though the enemies smile, sometimes that smile will go away. So don't feel so comfortable, assuming that everything will be okay and that you can trust him. There's of course a lot of individuals out there who are really angels, who were prepared to sacrifice their lives to save a Jew during the Holocaust. Non-Jews. There's all kinds of people everywhere. But be careful, because even though you see sometimes the smile on someone's face, you don't know what's behind that smile. And even though it may be a genuine smile, it could be that one day that smile will turn. In other words, will go away and be something else, not a smile. Pasuk Kaf Vav. Actually, before we continue with Pasuk Kaf Vav, just another word on discrimination. We don't discriminate. We're supposed to believe that every human being is created in the image of God. And that's the truth. Everyone is special in some way. Otherwise, why would God create him, bring him into this world? And we have to be respectful and treat everyone fairly. That's what Judaism teaches. However, the other way around, it wasn't always true. As you know, in Russia, there's communism until this day. It was a lot worse in the past because there was no freedom of religion. And Jews who lived in Russia during the real Stalinist and communist rule could not advance. Because they were Jewish, they could not get the top job, whether it was in a university, whether it was in some industry, because of their religion, because of their faith. Even though they may not have been observant, still they could not advance. So this is a fact that we've seen everywhere, and this is a reminder to us that in the end, it's all from above. It's to remind us that we have a mission, and that mission hopefully will be fulfilled in Israel as a nation, not in the outside, in the exile. Sometimes people forget, and they think that there's no more Israel, there's no more temple, there's no more Judaism. So reminders come in all kinds of ways, and we should not blame them, for being anti-Semites or for discriminating, because in the end, even though that may be partially true, it's all by design from above. So Pasuk Vav speaks about already the redemption. The Jewish people went through the years of struggle in Egypt, comes the redemption. Shalach Moshe Avdo Aharon Asher Bachar Bo. Who does Hashem send to redeem them? Moshe and Aaron, two individuals. Why two? Each one has a different job. But what we see here is also a remez. This insinuates that this is exactly what will happen in the future. We will have two individuals that will bring about the final redemption. One of them is Mashiach, which everyone knows, the Messiah. The other one is Elyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet. What's his job? Part of his job is to get everyone to commit themselves to Torah and Mitzvot, to strengthen their connection, their bond with God, and to make peace. As you know, part of the problem of why the second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred, divisiveness. In order for the Mashiach to come, for the third temple to be rebuilt, there needs to be peace. So somehow he accomplishes that, or he initiates that. And we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of individuals today returning to their roots, becoming more committed to Torah values. And this is happening actually all over the world. Somehow, even non-Jews are sensing that their life, their materialistic lifestyle is so empty, devoid of any meaning. So they're turning to God or something. So people are hopefully going to realize that there's more to life than just making money and seeking pleasures. And in this generation where materialism is king, it's a real struggle because people think that's all there is. You only live once, they tell you. You might as well enjoy it. But what happens when they're disappointed, when they can't get all their enjoyment? Hopefully they will begin to think maybe there's something else. Money cannot buy happiness. And some people have to learn it the hard way. So the Geulah happens after all this trouble. Shalach Moshe Avdo Aaron Asher Bachar Bo. He sent Moses, his servant Aaron, whom he had chosen. They're the ones to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. All right. Now he begins to describe what exactly happened in Egypt. Now, for those of us who learned Parashat Shemot, Vayera, Bo, Beshalach, in the book of Exodus, Shemot, we're somewhat familiar as far as what plagues took place in Egypt, what the plagues were, what they represent. Each plague came for another reason. As the rabbis teach us, when God punishes, the attribute of justice is midah keneged midah, it's measure for measure. So the 10 plagues were 10 for a reason, and were certain plagues for a particular reason. In other words, it's not that just God decided, okay, I think blood will be a good idea. I think frogs is great. No. It's not just haphazard. Nothing happens by chance, and it's not because Egypt has many frogs. Nothing to do with that. What have we been saying till now? That everything is by design. So even the makot, the plagues that occurred in Egypt, were by design. Measure for measure. So he reviews those makot here to point this out, that whatever happened in Egypt was for a reason and should serve as a lesson that in the future, when natural phenomena that is very, very strange occurs, don't think that it's El Niño or La Niña or global warming or anything of that nature is from above. So Pasuk Kav Zayin, 27. Samu bam divrei ototav umofetim be'eretz Cham. These two leaders who were responsible for the redemption, they had a job even before the redemption began. They are the ones that warned Paro, if you don't send them free, this is what you're going to experience. So they had to prove it to him that God sent them. They had to prove to the Jewish people, they had to convince them that this is for real, that the redemption is coming. So you have in Pasuk of Zayin, you have two parts to it. Samu bam divrei ototav. They placed among them the words of his signs. Who's them? The Jewish people. They needed to be convinced. Plus umofetim be'eretz Cham, as well as miracles in the land of Cham. So you're having the Jewish people needing to be convinced this is for real, and you're having the Egyptians have having to observe or experience the various makot. And all of these makot, all of these plagues are called ortot or moftim, miracles or wonders. There were such miracles to dispel anybody's idea, perhaps, that this is just an act of nature. So they needed to be very, very extreme, very unusual. That's what a mufet is. Otherwise, people can easily attribute it to nature. They needed, therefore, to be otot and moftim, to convince the two, the Jews and the non-Jews, the Egyptians, that there is a God who's in control of nature as well. Why did the Egyptians need it to be convinced? Because they believed in all kinds of magic powers, witchcraft, demonology. They were into that, very, very much into that. And it could be very impressive, because these are powers too, from the impure forces. And here comes along Moshe and says, all those powers mean nothing. Try them out, and you'll see you can't defeat God. You can't overrule Him. You can't change His mind. In other words, you cannot alter anything that He decides that should happen. And they tried. No matter what they did, they couldn't stop the makot. So therefore, Moshe and Aaron performed certain miracles and certain signs in order to convince the Jewish people and the Egyptians that God is about to redeem them from Egypt. All right. Kaf Chet begins with darkness. Shalach choshech vayachashich velo maru et devaro. He sent darkness and made it dark, and they did not defy His word. So the first question you may have is, wait a minute, isn't blood the first one? Then why does it talk about darkness? Well, first of all, you see in the words velo maru et devaro that they did not defy His word. The plagues did not defy His words. Means that they were like those targeted missiles. You know, the smart bombs? They go exactly to where they need to go. They don't miss. They have an exact address. The plagues had an exact address. Every square inch of Egypt, but only Egypt, and not the homes of the Israelites. So in that itself, you saw that the plagues did not defy His word. They went according to His word to the right address, the right location. As the Medrash points out, that from certain places you were able to recognize the boundaries of Egypt. Back then too, the nations argued about the borders. This is ours. No, this is ours. When they saw the plagues, they realized, oh, Egypt is still here, because that is where the plague affected. So they did not defy the word of Hashem. They did exactly as Hashem told them to do. And he begins by describing darkness, that Hashem sent darkness. So why is darkness mentioned first? Anybody want to guess? What happened during the Makkah of darkness? Even though the Egyptians had a hard time, they couldn't move.
1/5 died?
Exactly. There were many Jews that died as well. Those that did not want to leave Egypt. Midrash also says that was the time that the Jews were able to discover the treasures of the Egyptians. So there are various explanations as to what went on during darkness. So because of that, perhaps he points out darkness in the very beginning because it affected. This is the only Makkah that did affect in a limited way the Jewish nation as well. All right, could be. But anyway, each Makkah, with the exception of two, is mentioned over here. So the next one is as follows. Hafach et memehem ledam vayam et digatam. He transformed their waters to blood and killed their fish. Okay, that seems easy. What is it coming to tell us? Well, don't think it was cranberry juice. Don't think it was red paint. It was really blood. How do we know? Because the fish died. Vayam et digatam. In other words, don't think that this was just colored water. But why would he make it into blood? So you might say, well, is measure for measure. They threw Jewish babies. Okay. killed the fish, it became smelly. Yeah, they really suffered. But why go to that extent of turning all the water supply into blood and killing the fish? A lot of people who learned about this in the Torah sometimes forget a very important detail. They worship the Nile. Egypt doesn't get that much rain. This is their God. I'm going to go after your God first. So Dam was the first plague. This is who they worship. This is what you worshipped. You don't turn to him, you don't pray to him. I'm going to take care of that. He won't be able to help you. And how could you help yourself without water? You can appreciate why this was important to them. Obviously it was important because they have no rain, so this is their source of livelihood in a sense. Still, you don't worship that. You have to worship the one who provides you with sustenance, with rain, and with food, not the water itself. So that's why the water was affected first. Next, Pasuk Lamed. Sharatz artzam tzfardeim b'chadrei malchehem. Their land swarmed with frogs in the chambers of the kings. In the chambers of their kings. Okay, frogs. There's a reason for them too. They made a lot of noise. All right, then what is he adding over here? He's adding bechadrei malchehem. Don't think that the frogs just swarmed around the swampy areas, the little huts of those in the fields. No, even in the chambers of their kings, which are marble. Frogs would usually not enter such a place, has no reason to go there. Yeah, but if it's from above, if it's not just frogs, looking for a place to stick around, if it's from above, they're going to go everywhere they're told to go. And they actually went everywhere, even into the kitchens, into the ovens, everywhere. Again, to impress upon them, this is not the typical average frog. What are they after? They're after you. So, in order to impress upon them that this is an act of God, not just an act of nature, they went everywhere. So that's this particular detail pointing to. It went even into the chambers of the kings. Next, Lamed Aleph. Amar vayavo arov kinim bechol gevulam. He spoke and hordes of wild beasts came, and then lice throughout their borders. Okay, so these two is all from Hashgacha from above for a specific reason why there was all kinds of wild animals attacking them and lice. What's interesting about all these makot, I noticed, is that if you analyze the makot, all the four elements are present. Everything in creation consists of the four elements. We have air, fire, water, and earth. And you have approximately 2 makot in each of the elements. For example, dam and tzfardea. We talked about blood and frogs. That is more associated with the water element, blood and the frogs, right? Kinim and arov are more associated with earth, the lice and the hordes of animals. Then you have dever and shchin, pestilence and boils, even though they're not mentioned here, and I'm going to explain soon why. They're more associated with fire. Barad, hail, is a mixture of fire and water, because that hail that came down in Egypt had a mixture of the two. Then you have arbe and choshech. Arbe in itself perhaps is a mixture of air and earth, because it flies, the locust. And choshech and makat bechorot, darkness and the death of the firstborn, is air, complete air. In other words, the soul, the spirit, was taken from the firstborn. It could be that here we have an example of how everything was affected, all the elements, so that the Egyptians should not claim this God is limited in some way. He can only affect this area, but he cannot affect this area. He's only in the upper worlds, but not in the lower worlds. No, he's in the upper worlds, plus he's involved very, very much in the lower worlds as well. And you can see that in every area, and in every aspect of life. The only thing the Jews did not yet know until they left Egypt is that this God is also kind and provides. Here they're seeing a God who punishes. They're not yet familiar with this God who will take care of them and provide for them for 40 years in the desert, and of course, every day of their life. That they don't know yet. They're not so familiar with what this God is. Here they're seeing plague after plague. Arov is mentioned before Kinim. The plague, even though Kinim came first. Why is Arov mentioned first? Anyway, so the commentaries say that Arov was a much more powerful Makkah. It involved wild beasts all over the country versus Kinim that was just lice. Could be. Otherwise, the real order is Kinim was before Arov. But it went Bechol Gevulam. It went throughout the borders, as I mentioned earlier. Only in Egypt, they were able to see that these animals or the lice or anything else did not affect the Jewish homes. That itself too was Bashgacha. So it was not just, okay, all of Egypt was affected. It's an act of nature. Everybody suffers alike. No, you're going to suffer, and some people are not going to suffer. If you want to have a more recent example of this, of how sometimes one area is affected and not another, I prefer the best example is Kibbutz Chafetz Chaim. You may have heard it. There's a religious kibbutz in Israel. And in the early years of the state, when the state formed, everybody struggled to make a living. They didn't have the infrastructure that they have today. And there is a biblical law, which even though today is more rabbinic, it's still an important law, and that is the sabbatical year, that we don't work the fields. And that is very interesting, a very interesting mitzvah, because it's a big challenge for someone who depends on his field, on the wheat, on the produce of the field, to survive, to make a living, whether it's his business, whether he uses it for himself. Imagine not working in the field for an entire year. How are you going to take care of your family? So the Torah promises us, makes us an incredible promise. Yes, it's a big challenge, but you will be blessed in the 6th year that you will have 3 years of yield to cover the 6th, the 7th, and a portion of the 8th until you begin to harvest the new harvest. That's an incredible promise. And guess what? They were able to see this blessing come true. Otherwise, they would have said, wait, Moshe, how could you lie? So if Moshe said that, of course, in the name of God, he made a very, very incredible promise that if you keep Shemitah, you will see the blessing. So the big question is, how come the Jews stopped keeping Shemitah even though they saw the blessing? That just comes to show you how the evil inclination is so powerful, that even when people sometimes see the blessing with their own eyes, they still try to see if they can get away with it and not observe the law. Take a year off. Learn Torah, spend the time with your family. It's not only about work. Hashem wanted us to take off a year. This is an agricultural society, in order to remind us that it's not only about work. Just like you have one day a week that is Shabbat, you have 1 year that is a Shabbat. It's a sabbatical year. Don't work the field. Go ahead and do something else, and hopefully connect with God in a way that you haven't been doing all along. Study a little bit more. So here, what happens back then, in other words, when they had this whole entire year, it was a big challenge. Many of them saw the miracle. When they came to Israel, now recently, and wanted to adopt this mitzvah, they realized that it would be very, very difficult, even more difficult than ever, because this is a new place, and they don't have all the irrigation. They may not have so much rain. It's a semi-arid, location, in the south especially. What now? Should they still observe the Shemitah or not? So this was a big question and a big challenge. But of course the very, very religious said, no matter what happens, we are going to observe the Shemitah exactly as the Torah says, in the way it was done in the past, approximately. And a lot of them chose not to. A lot of the other kibbutzim who were not as religious chose not to. They say it's impossible. We will not be able to survive, and to import from outside is very expensive. So therefore they decided to work the lands. That particular year was a very dry year. There was very little rain. And all those kibbutzim that did not keep the Shemitah suffered greatly. What happened in Chafetz Chaim? Rain fell in that kibbutz. There was a reporter there. He says, I'm standing at the edge of the kibbutz where the fence is. And there's not one drop of rain outside of the kibbutz. All the rain is falling on this kibbutz. Just like we said here, the plagues went b'chol gevulam, where they were told to go, in all or within the boundaries of Egypt. They did not go beyond those boundaries. They kept to the location that Hashem told them to. The same with the miracle. It was a miracle. They saw the rain coming down just in that kibbutz. So that kibbutz actually did well because of the rain that they got on that year, that they kept the laws of Shemitah. So you don't lose by being a good person, by doing the right thing. People think sometimes that you're a sucker. That's what they call you. If you're a good man and you do the right thing, that you will suffer and you will lose out. No. There are many, many stories that prove just the opposite, that those people who were good and did the right thing, they were blessed, as in the case of the story of the Kibbutz Chafetz Chaim, which was, of course, written up in the newspaper by that journalist, who was not religious, who was a witness to the fact that only there the rain fell. Interesting. All right, let's go on. So what happens after the Arov and the Kinim and the lice? Natan gishmehem barad esh lehavot be'artzam. So the next one is the hail. Verse 32. He turned their rains to hail, flaming fire in their land. Because the rain not only turned into barad, but also had within it fire, which was unusual, since when do you have hail with fire? So this was a very destructive type of hail. Not only was it big hail, but it was with fire. So it begins with the word gishmehem. It didn't just start as hail. It started off as rain. This rain is a blessing, is a good thing. So you see that even the potential for blessing was taken away from them. The rain could have been a blessing to the land. And Hashem says, no, your rain, the little rain that you get, is now going to be transformed into punishing hail. So the source of their blessing was taken away from them through this particular plague of hail. What was affected as a result of the hail? Vayach gafnam utenatam v'shaber etz gevulam. Verse 33. It struck their vine and the fig trees. It broke the trees and the borders. What happened to Dever and Shechin? We're talking about Barad, but before Barad, you have pestilence. You have boils, as I mentioned before. For some reason, these two are not mentioned in this list. So I think the commentary Ibn Ezra says it could be that those two were left out here because they are the plagues that Paro never asked Moshe, please pray to have them removed. I can't take them anymore. That's an interesting explanation. There could be other explanations as why those two do not appear over here. So that's why the next one is the hail. And this hail was a very interesting hail, not only because of its composition, but look at verse 33. Vayach gafnam utenatam v'shabetz gevulam. It destroyed the grapes, the vines, the fig trees. Why does it tell us that it destroyed those things? Why not? It destroyed everything. No, the Torah, if you read the Torah, it says that the grains, certain grains, were spared. Hashem did not take away everything. Hashem kept some food around that they were going to need a little bit later. He had mercy on them. And of course for other reasons too. Preserve some of the food. So you see, this is a warning. I'm going to take away some very important crops, the vines and the figs, but I'm going to leave other things. So this too is b'hashgacha. In other words, because it could very easily happen when you have a tremendous flood instead of hail. Flood. That everything is destroyed. Then you might say, well, it's just a natural disaster. Everything is destroyed. Like a wildfire. Everything destroyed. But here, where do you see the hashgacha? After all, that what is the point of all of this? Is to show to everyone Hashgachat Hashem, divine providence. You see, only these items were affected, not everything else. There's a reason for that. Think about it. Perhaps God is kind to you. He's waiting for you to do teshuvah, to repent. He's giving you a chance. He's not going to take away everything from you. This could happen today too. Rabbis tell us that the divine judgment works like this. As much as we know, a person is supposed to be punished or warned. What first is affected are his finances. That's the easiest, because money comes and money goes. If he doesn't learn his lesson, then there's all kinds of illnesses, physical pain and suffering. If God forbid that doesn't work, that doesn't have any effect, then Hashem can take the soul as well. Hashem doesn't want to take the soul right away. He doesn't want to kill people. Various prophets point to this, that God is not interested in killing the evildoers. He would rather that they repent and come back to Him. So He sends warning signals. So that's the point over here. It's not to destroy everything. If that was the point, then just send one makkah. Why 10? One by one, little by little, to impress upon them. Look at this mighty God. He's in charge of everything. Every aspect of your life has been affected. But He didn't destroy you at once. So, of course, not everyone analyzes that. That's why we're learning this. Because it's important to analyze that there's a lot of messages in how Hashem communicates with us. And through the Makot, hopefully, the idea was that not only the Jews, but the non-Jews, the Egyptians, should learn, should realize this is the only boss. All the other ones that we've been worshiping, that's nothing. They have no value. That's why this happened in Egypt, because they were the most, of any other nation, the most immersed in the impure forces. They were the witches. They were the ones that dealt with demons. So they were the first ones to admit, you know what? This must be the hand of God. This can't be anything else. Because they were experts. They could differentiate. No, this cannot be done by a demon. We're helpless. So you see, this is all to impress upon the Jews and of course upon the Egyptians that it's all from above. This is not an act of nature. Next, Amar vayavo arbe beyelek ben mispar. Verse 34, he spoke to grasshoppers came, locusts without number. So he spoke. The arbe could come on their own, right? No. Arbe comes, the locusts come, they can be very destructive. We all know that. They eat everything. That's why it says Amar. It's when he said, go there. Why not go to some other country? No, they only went to Egypt. Why Egypt? Because Hashem said so. Amar. He spoke and the grasshoppers came, the locusts in large numbers. And what did they do? Verse 35, Vayochal kol eseb be'artzam vayochal periya batam. And they consumed all the grass in their land and ate the fruit of their soil. So whatever is left over, they came and consumed. So now Hashem is, intensifying it. You have some food left, and you still are rebelling against me. You're still not giving in. You didn't learn the lesson. Well, perhaps now you will. So it's becoming a little bit tighter. More pressure is put on them. This is the last one. Verse 36. He smote every firstborn in the land, the first of all their potency. Whether it was the first to the mother or the first to the father. But here too, it says be'artzam, in their land. What for? We know that it was in their land. So the commentaries tell us that, imagine an Egyptian who's the firstborn, and he knew it's coming. He's afraid for his life. Perhaps he should go hide in the Jewish home. It wouldn't help him. Be'artzam, wherever he was, it came to him. Now here it says Vayach. Who did this? Hashem. Only Hashem is able to distinguish firstborn from not a firstborn. An angel cannot do that. So it's not the angel of death who's involved over here. It's God Himself. this detail is also important because it reminds us of the Hashgacha of Hashem. Hashem is involved, because otherwise you would say, maybe it was just an epidemic. Oh, really? Of the firstborn? Since when is there an epidemic of just the firstborn? But you'd be surprised. The heretics would say, well, it's probably some defective gene of the firstborn. Okay, right? Anybody can say anything they want, but we know it's not so. It can't be. So this particular Makai, being the firstborn, even though we know firstborn has other significance too. It's the first child, it means a lot to them. But it's by design. Hashem says, I'm the one that's doing it, and I'm the only one that can tell the difference between the firstborn or not, and one who's not a firstborn. So it's not the angel of death, it's not natural death, it's not some sort of epidemic. People can say all kinds of things because they're in denial. So here, hopefully, they would be impressed, if not by the first plague, by the 10th. What happened after that? Verse 37, and he took them out with silver and gold, and none among his tribes stumbled. So they came out with silver and gold because they were promised. Abraham Avinu was promised that when they leave Egypt, they will be coming out with silver and gold. They will not go empty-handed for all their hard work. This reminds us that when we leave this diaspora, we're going to get some benefit of all the hardships. We don't know what those benefits will be until Mashiach comes. But it's not that it's going to be just pain and suffering, and that's it, accept it. There's some good that you're going to get out of it. So the silver and gold, even though they don't need silver and gold, in the end, it was to build the tabernacle. Otherwise, where are they going to get silver and gold from? But it's perhaps also to remind us that from any challenging situation that one is in, he will come out with some gain. And none among his tribes stumbled. This insinuates that even though they were there for so long, they did not succumb to the immoral type of behavior that the Egyptians exemplified. The immoral behavior was very, very typical of Egyptian society. So here he's saying, despite all those years in Egyptian society, none of the tribes stumbled. That's one explanation. There are additional explanations, but I think this one fits in very, very well. But don't think that in any way they were no longer as spiritual as they were from before they came to Egypt. On the contrary, they did not change their name, they did not change their language, they remained pure, and they did not assimilate. Even though there were some, of course, that according to the Medrash, who died in the plague of darkness, who were not eager to leave. And they were learning from the Egyptian culture certain things. But the vast majority here stayed strong. Samach Mitzrayim b'tzetam ki nafal pachadam aleim, verse 38, Egypt rejoiced at the leaving, for the fear of Israel had fallen upon them. They felt good that they were leaving because they were afraid of those plagues coming back. That's one idea behind their happiness. This particular pasuk is also perhaps insinuating the pachad, the fear, that the Arab nations had at certain times when they fought against Israel. Many of them claim that all of a sudden they were afraid to advance. Where's the Israeli army? They said. The Syrian army said when they crossed over and they were advancing in the Yom Kippur War. They were afraid that there was some sort of trap. There were various times when many Arab soldiers claimed that they saw something that stopped them on their tracks. They were afraid. So that pachad is also, that fear is also from above. When someone all of a sudden is fearful, why are you fearful? Aren't you confident? You have the weapons, you have the experience. Somehow there was a fear upon them, and that fear is also from above. The happiness of the Egyptians, however, could be because of the chen. Hashem gave the Jewish people chen. Chen means grace, that they were liked by the Egyptians. The Egyptians did not hate them. And as a result of that, they were willing to lend them things, and they were happy for them. So here you have fear, but on the other hand, they're happy for them. That is already the continuation in the desert, verse 39, that he spread out a cloud of shelter and a fire to illuminate the night. Hashem took care of them. They had air conditioning. That's the way I call it. You know, he made their experience in the desert, he made it comfortable. How? It was miraculous. 40 years in the desert, being exposed to the elements, Hashem watched over them. A cloud of shelter and fire to illuminate the night. Also an important idea, that even if you're in a desert, even if you're in a place where you think, how am I going to make it out here? He's there. There are many, many stories of how people survive miraculously in the desert. What about food? No problem, Hashem says. I have the biggest catering company in the world. Mm-hmm. All the animals belong to me. All the birds belong to me. They asked for quail. He brought them quail. With the bread of heaven, he satisfied them. Why not just bread? Bread alone. The man should have been enough to satisfy them. But they wanted to eat meat. They wanted to have steak. Hashem says, you know what? I'm not happy with this request, but I'm going to give it to you, so that you should never say, God cannot provide meat. Don't ever say that there's one thing that God cannot provide. If you ask for it, and it's reasonable, you may get it. So you see, they asked and they got. Another indicator that prayer helps. Speak to Him. He may not give you everything you want, because who's to say that what you want is good for you? God, I want to marry that girl. Who says she's for you? Maybe she will ruin your life. He makes matches in heaven because He knows who goes together. So don't insist on someone specific. God, convince the boss that he should accept me, that the interview should go well. No, you're going to fail the interview because you don't belong there. You belong somewhere else. We don't know that. It's only after the fact that we realize, oh, thank God I didn't end up there, I ended up somewhere else. It's all from above. Verse 41. He opened the rock and waters flowed. They streamed through dry places like a river. We're familiar with that scene. They were provided with water in the desert. Of all places, from a rock. What does this tell you? Yes, if God wishes for you to make money from a rock, it will happen. I told you once maybe the story of a guy who was not making too much money for a long time, and he had this opportunity to buy a container from China. And I think that container had some very, very cheap jeans. And they told him, you can buy it for $1 a piece. He says, okay, cheap, who's going to buy this type of jeans? 10 minutes later, he gets a phone call. By the way, would you happen to have some jeans? The exact thing that he had just bought 10 minutes ago. Not one day, 10 minutes ago. How is he getting a phone call 10 minutes later? And that container could have been matchsticks. It could have been anything. There is a buyer for everything. Hashem makes the match happen. He will bring you the customer. You would never dream of it. How am I going to make money out of this? 10 minutes later, he gets a phone call. Yes, water from the rock. I use this pasuk to explain that the water can come elsewhere, not from a rock. Yes, but Hashem is teaching us, if I'm going to give you parnasah, livelihood, I can give it in many ways. Don't tell me how to give it to you. It could be you can win the lottery too, of course. It could be through hard work. Yes. It could be of something that you never expected. So he opened up a rock and allowed the waters to flow while they were in dry places. Like a river, it flowed. Because he remembered Abraham, he remembered his word to Abraham, his servant. Hashem keeps his promise. And he brought out his nation with joy, his chosen one with song. Why talk about his chosen one over here? Because even though they went through hard labor in Egypt, you might think that they're not so chosen. No, but in the end it's with joy, right? In the end everybody was happy to leave. Nobody complained, oh, all those 210 years of hard work. They were all along his Bechirav. They didn't realize that in the end they're about to receive the Torah. Oh, perhaps those 210 years were supposed to train me to be subordinate, so that I can now accept a life of responsibilities and of mitzvot and commandments. Maybe that has something to do with it. People don't always think that way. Yes, the challenges build us, the challenges teach us. So therefore they left with sason, they left with reassurance that this is all for the good. They were all along his bechirav, his chosen ones. He gave them the lands of nations, they inherited the toil of peoples. The land is waiting for them. They were able to conquer it in a miraculous way. They're outnumbered. There are many nations. But if Hashem wills it, it's going to happen. If they don't, God forbid, deserve it, then they're going to have a hard time. But things went pretty smooth. I say pretty smooth because they had their ups and downs in the desert too. But Hashem gives it to them because this is what He has in mind for them. Then it's going to happen. If something is meant to be, it's going to happen. So they're going to inherit the land and they're going to take it over. Why? What's the purpose of all of this? The last verse is Ba'avur yishmeru chokav v'torotav yinsoru, hallelujah. So that they might keep His statutes and observe His laws. Praise Hashem. In other words, this last verse reminds us that the whole inheritance of the land is twofold. Number one, in order that we should have peace of mind and be able to observe the Torah mitzvot, Hashem will not make our life too difficult. He wants us to be able to observe the Torah. So therefore, hopefully, the weather will cooperate, we won't have wars, the economy will flourish, because that's the ultimate goal of what we're supposed to do, to observe His laws and be the light into the nations. On the other hand, we inherited the land in the merit that we observe the Torah mitzvahs. If we do not observe, we will be kicked out. And that's exactly what happened. So, in the end, we must realize that our connection to the land depends on our observance to the Torah mitzvot. Our entire success as a nation depends on holding on to the Torah mitzvot. And the good news, for which we say hallelujah, for which we praise Hashem, is that all of what we've just read will repeat itself again very soon. That in the same way that we were once redeemed from Egypt, the future redemption will be very, very similar, except in one thing, the miracles will be even greater. Amen.